we doing? This is Fox back again for another tutorial for ADSR. If you're not subscribed to our YouTube channel, I suggest you head over there and check out some of our other tutorials. It's youtube.com/ADSR tuts. Okay, that was a preview of the sound we're going to be making today. I had a personal request to make a sub bass, of which the likes of Jubei or Alex Perez use. I listened to a couple of tracks that the geezer recommended me to listen to. And they were really deep sub basses, as you would imagine, but towards the end of the 4-bar or an 8-bar, they sort of opened up to like reveal a bit of gritty sort of metallic sound to them. And that's what I've tried to achieve here. I haven't copied a sound in particular, I've tried to do my own spin on it. So yeah, I'll show you the sound on its own without the drum loop. Yeah, as you can hear, so there's some real deep elements to it. We've got used in two classic waveforms, square and sine waves, most commonly used for subs. And then I've chose wave 39 for its metallic elements, and then I've modulated the filter to open up to reveal them towards the end of these notes. So yeah, I've done the modulation for this inside an envelope, inside a MIDI clip in Ableton, modulating the mod wheel. But all the modulation is done inside the virus. Everything is assigned to the mod wheel. So if you have a mod wheel on your virus, if you've got one of the bigger ones and not the snow, you could play it live and modulate with a mod wheel to open up these effects that I've modulated. But it's just as easy to draw it in as you want inside your clip or in whatever DAW that you're using. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and initialize this so we can get down to it. As I say, the drums are muted, so it's only going to be this sound. So oscillator 1 I chose was a sine wave. It's in the classic waveform. I pulled it back -24, really deep, 2 octaves. It's just the pure sine wave on its own. Oscillator 2 is a classic waveform as well. This one was a square. I changed the pulse width to about 63%. I didn't want it to be solely a square. I wanted it to have some higher elements. That's why I pushed it slightly to the right. I pulled this one down 2 octaves as well, -24. Balance between these two oscillators was dead center. I used a bit of FM between these two oscillators just to grit it up a little bit as well. I use a wave shaper. And I changed the FM to 33.6. As close to a third as you can get. It's a real sweet spot within the virus. It makes everything sound a lot better. So with the FM, oscillator 3, as I say, I chose wave 39. Down just 1 octave. Kept the volume for this above the C where it comes as standard. I did use a tiny little bit of sub oscillator. I mean, these two are really deep. You're not really going to hear it, but it does help give some more punch to the bottom end. You probably end up EQing it out later on, but I still like to use it on my subs. I always give it just a tiny bit, about a quarter of the way. Unison I set to twin just to thicken it all up. Push the detuning round to about 17. Pan spread to about 7%. Tiny bit of ring modulation just above the O. Again, this helps mingle with the higher aspects of wave 39, just helps grit it up a little bit. Okay, we're going to go on to the filter section now. They're both low pass filters, as you would imagine with a sub bass. The first one, I didn't change that analog mode, I kept it how it was as standard. I pulled the cutoff all the way back to about 66, 67. This one I gave a bit of envelope. You're not really going to hear the envelope having much effect because it is a sub bass, but I tried it on and off and it does make a difference. Just this tiny little back of the attack off. Trust me, it does make a difference. So it doesn't look like much because it's quite a quick. You think that the envelope's going to open to where you put it straight away, but it does make a difference. I'll push it around to just underneath the A, about 40%. Bit of resonance for this filter as well, about 16. Filter 2 is a low pass filter as well. This one, the cutoff I pulled right back to -54. So we're going to modulate this with a mod wheel, so you can open this up later on. Cutoff link and filter link are both checked, so the resonance and the envelope amount are the same as what we dialed in for filter 1, which is what we want. So the two filters engaged. Really deep. Probably going to need headphones to hear this, or some monitors. If you're listening to it on a handheld device, you're probably not going to get the real gist of how deep this is. I did use a bit of filter saturation. I changed it to light. I pushed it ever so slightly from its original position, about +3, +4, just slightly leaning towards the saturation side. Kept it in series 4 mode. So yeah, that's it for the filter section. We'll just set up the amp envelope while we're here. Back the attack off slightly. Just a little bit longer attack than what we've got for the filter one. Sustain level down to about 89%. Tiny bit of release, about 11. Okay, so you're hardly hearing anything because it is such a low patch. We'll go in the matrix section now and set up all the modulation. So you are going to hear the effects of this automation I've got in this MIDI clip. So what I did, the only modulation source I used was a mod wheel, and I set it to filter 1 cutoff, filter 2 cutoff, and the unison detune, which is this. Just helps twist the sound slightly as you open it up. Filter 1 cutoff I had all the way to the top, so it's going to open it all the way up. Filter 2 cutoff I had a lot less, about +28. And the unison detune just shy of maximum, about +51. You can hear this modulation that I've drew in now, like opening the filters and the unison detune up. The other modulation, what I did, we're going to use an LFO later on. I used the mod wheel again. Mod wheel. I used it for LFO3 as sine amount, which we're going to go ahead and set up in a minute. This is just a little bit of pitch modulation, just to help give the sub a bit of movement. And I used it for filter bank frequency. Now this is going to be a Vowel filter later on as well, which we're going to use. That's it for the modulation in the matrix section. As I say, it's the mod wheel that does all the work, so you can play it on the fly and mess around with it as you want. So we'll go to the LFO section now. The only LFO I did use was LFO3. I changed it to a quarter speed, changed it to a sine wave so it was nice and smooth, and I used this designated knob that you've got for oscillator 1 and 2 pitch, which is like a tremolo. The quarter note isn't going to be too fast, about 35%. And in the matrix section, I assigned the mod wheel to pull this amount down. So as you go from a sub to the higher elements, the LFO is going to decrease in speed. I mean, you can play with this to taste. You can go crazy with it if you want. I thought it sounded better with just a slight modulation, so as I say, I had it on about 35%. FX1, I used an analog boost, as always, on a patch like this. I pushed it right heavily round to about 65%, and the tune right down so it was aiming at the low part of the sound, about character at about 11. This is a little trick, not many people do this. I'm probably the only person I know that does this. I do use a chorus on a sub bass. I can hear it because I've been using the voice for ages, and I know what this vintage chorus sounds like. Some people are going to say that they can't hear it, but I do help it thinks give something extra to a sub bass rather than just a classic sine wave with a filter on it. So yeah, I don't do anything when I use this. I just put it on vintage mode, no crossover, no LFO. I'll set the chorus mix to about 50. Distortion, I used an onion overdrive. This is quite a harsh overdrive. I'm quite heavy on the mix, quite heavy on the drive as well, about 49%. This tone is all important, minus 100%. This is pointing right at the sub part. Again, it's just going to help give some width to the sub to help it stand out from just a normal sine wave one. Okay, in the filter bank, I didn't use any phaser. In the filter bank I used a Vowel filter. Quite heavy on the mix again for this as well, about 60%. The Vowel, this is the filter bank frequency, which is going to be modulated by the mod wheel, so it helps change the sound of the vowel. I had this starting position set on about 40%. And the resonance, this is almost like the volume of the vowel. When it's on 0, you're not going to hardly hear anything. So yeah, the resonance I had on about 60%. That really helps accentuate the peaks in your automation, especially when it gets to the higher ones. Without it, it sounded quite dull. It really did make the sound this Vowel filter. The only other thing to do is just a bit of EQ, and I boosted the lows quite heavy, plus 9 dB. That's probably the most I've ever boosted anything within the virus. So it is a really sub-heavy patch. I boosted the mids and the highs also. Mids and the highs about the same, 2.5, 3 dB, something like that. The only other effect I used was a delay. Again, most people would tell you not to use a delay on a sub bass because they tell you you're not going to hear it, but the setting that I use, if you turn it on, keep it on classic, set it to 1/64, it's that fast you can hardly hear the delay working. It just helps thicken the sound up. You're not really going to hear it on the sub part, but as it opens up at these points in the modulation, it just helps make the sound even bigger. Whereas when I listened to Jubei and Alex Perez's tracks, there wasn't really much to them. It was quite minimal drums. The main bulk of the track and the main heart of the track is purely just the sub bass. So you want it to fill as much of the spectrum as it can when it opens up. So yeah, neat trick, really quick delay. I'll play it without the delay and then I'll turn it on so you can hear the difference. Quite subtle using the delay to thicken the sound up, but I say along with everything else it helps to make the sound as a whole. So yeah, that's pretty much the sound done. Nothing too untoward. So 2 classic waveforms and something else with a bit of grit just to add a bit of variance when we open it up with the mod wheel. As I say, yeah, this is really good to mess around with when you're playing with your sub bass. Just mess around with the mod wheel just to get the sound that you want. But yeah, for now, as always, make sure you check out the channel again. Subscribe if you haven't. Any questions or comments, try to leave it in the bottom. Okay, thanks for watching. Cheers.